Welcome inside Black and Gold, Week 5, Kansas City Monday Night Football week. And man, oh man, the injury report is obviously scary as we imagined. We are in spooky season, as they say now, Jeff. That's instead of even just Halloween or the month of October, spooky season seems to be a trend.
Spooky, scary. That's a 30 Rock reference. If you Werewolf Bar Mitzvah. Hey, have you watched 30 Rock?
I've seen 30 Rock, yeah.
Okay, that's one of my favorite. Is Werewolf Bar Mitzvah, spooky, scary.
Yeah, that's one of those. Surprisingly, I'm not way behind on.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna catch up on the injury report today. It's not typically how we'd handle our Friday episode, but it's a Monday Night Football week, so we didn't get the initial injury report until Thursday, and so we got a good picture of what the Saints are looking at. So we'll dive into that. We'll dive into, hey, Kendre Miller is back. Woohoo! Dennis Allen sounds ambivalent. I think that's a good word. We'll see how that situation develops. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the 15 players who were listed on the Saints injury report. If you're doing the math at home, that is 28% of the Saints active roster that's listed on the injury report right now. So we'll go through that. It's going to be a long one. I want to update, okay, Derek Carr talked about Davante Adams. Dennis Allen kind of talked about Davante Adams. So we'll catch up on that. We'll talk about a few other subjects in this opening segment. Second segment, we'll talk to Dan Portillo, host of the Fastest 40 podcast, covering the Kansas City Chiefs. Give us a bit of a lowdown on what's been going on in Chiefs land. It's a 4-0 team that could be an 0-4 team, and basically the polar opposite of the Saints. So the Saints have won two blowout games and lost 2 close games. The Chiefs have won 4 incredibly close games. And speaking of close games, did you catch Falcons-Bucks last night?
What? That was a fun one to watch.
Kirk Cousins, 500 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. The Falcons, and this math is correct, I double checked, they have averaged 2 touchdowns per week on offense over the last 2 games.
How awful does the Bucks defense look?
Well, I mean, those Thursday night games, it's hard to say like this is the team that, like every week it's like you're not seeing the actual version of that defense. Like I caution Saints fans from watching that game and expecting that Bucks defense to show up 10 days from now. Because here's the thing. The Saints are going to play on Monday, have a short week, and then host the Bucks. The Bucks now have 10 days to stew over that terrible loss that they suffered. Of a loss that feels eerily similar to the Saints in that, like, hey, they had that game in hand and they blew it. And, Kirk is clutch. That's one thing you could say about Kirk is he, the 2024 Falcons feel a lot like the 2022 Vikings that won all those 1-score games and went 14-3 or whatever it was. But it was like the worst 14-3 you've ever seen. And then they lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Giants. Like, that's the 2022 Vikings. We saw that team. They beat the Saints in London in that exact type of game. Right? Like he can get it done in the 2-minute. Like, you will never question Kirk's ability in that late game scenario. But
yeah, they say like he's got that dog in him. Like, definitely the end of game scenarios, you kind of feel pretty good with Kirk as your quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's his game. Like you think you have to. I think the Saints kind of had it right. Is you have to stay aggressive and attack the guy and try to get him on the ground. And that's kind of what the Saints did on that last drive. Now they got a little too aggressive and they fouled, right? And that changed that final possession. But when you watch how the Eagles handled it, you watch how the Bucks handled it in those late game moments. I think they just sat back too much. Like, you got to just keep going after him, because if you just let him sit there, he will pick you apart. He is that type of quarterback if you give him time. But that was a fun game, and I know this isn't really what we're talking about, but the NFC South has been fun to watch so far, with that Panthers Saints game excluded. It's fun to watch for the Saints, but just in general, like Saints Falcons was a really, really enjoyable football game to watch. It was a lot of fun. It was 2 good teams playing each other well. And then Bucks Falcons, again, another just matchup of 2 good football teams playing a good football game. So say what you want about the NFC South. It's been fun to watch. I
like the whole Andy Dalton story in Carolina too. That's fun.
Yeah, and Andy Dalton and Derek Carr are the next 2 quarterbacks who are trying to go over 40,000 yards in their careers. So
unreal.
It's going to be a barn burner to see if Andy can get there. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the Saints. Final segment, we're going to hit X factors as we normally do. I have a lot of info on Chris Jones, which is kind of fascinating how the Chiefs defense operates with Chris Jones. And I talked to Colin Saunders, who was a teammate of him in Kansas City, and he gave some really good insight. And also talked to Dennis Allen, Derek Carr about how you handle that guy. And it's not going to be easy. I don't know if they can, but we'll find out. Either way, let's get back to the injury report. Let's just go through it really quick. So here's the Saints injury report. If it seems really small font, that's because that is the biggest it can be while showing all of the names, because gosh darn it, there are a lot of them. I kind of made the joke yesterday that it took a little longer to come out than normal. And I was like, maybe they're struggling to figure out how to produce a multi-page PDF, because a few more names on here and you would have to you'd have to go to the second page. You mentioned it early on. The only name you're happy to see is Kendre Miller. Yes. And there is one name missing from this. I did not add it. They sent out a new one. This is the first one, and that's Demario Davis. He did return to practice with that hamstring injury, but he was limited. On the Chiefs side, there is one more name, and it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was limited. His situation is really weird because it's like PTSD that he's dealing with that goes back to that shooting incident when he was at LSU, which is kind of crazy. I don't even know. I don't want to. Over like a video game system or cartridge, something. No, cartridge. How old are you? What are you talking about? Cartridge. What is this? You think he was playing Nintendo like NES? Yeah, I was doing retro. I don't know. Jesus. No. It goes back to the 2018 college football season. I was working at NOLA.com when it happened, and it was crazy. So, and we can get into it quickly. So the bowl gift that year, I can't remember what bowl they were in, but the bowl gift was a PlayStation 5, I want to say. It was a new PlayStation. He already had one. So he went to sell it on Craigslist, right? Now, when he met the guy who was trying to buy it, they went into his truck, and that guy tried to rob him at gunpoint. Clyde, who was armed, shot him in self-defense. He played in the bowl game. Like, he didn't miss any time. But obviously, that is a very, very traumatic situation. And I don't know, I can't speak for Clyde, but like that's what it's going back to, which is kind of crazy because I mean, I remember that situation and, it kind of disappeared really quickly, but that's a wild thing. And so that's the PTSD part of it, I believe, that he's kind of dealing with right now. And that's crazy. But so we don't know if he's going to play. That's just an odd thing to see on an injury report, is not like an illness limited. So I don't know, but maybe he does play. Maybe he can get back. Yeah, I can't, like you said, speak to it either, but I imagine shooting and killing a man can kind of mess with you for a while. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. For most human beings, right? I would be worried if it didn't. But anyway, that's not the topic I anticipated we starting on. But let's talk about football. And so the Saints have 15 names. We already mentioned Demario Davis. So I'm going to list the 6 players that did not participate today for the Saints, and we can move on from there. So you had linebacker Willie Gay dealing with that hand issue. He Instagrammed a picture of himself from a hospital. He clearly had some kind of procedure done. Dennis Allen wouldn't give us any indication there. He did not practice. We do not know exactly where he is in that scenario. Shout out to the Yankees cap in the photo. I didn't pay that close attention to it, but there you go. Yankees cap. Anyway, tight end Taysom Hill, rib injury, DMP. Dennis Allen did tell us he's dealing with fractures. I don't know how significant they are. We saw Alvin play through a significant rib injury last week. I'd be surprised if he plays, but I'm also not going to sit here and tell you it's impossible for him to play. He's played with rib injuries before. They give you the good drugs and they say go out there. If anything, he would be very limited in what you ask him to do if he's able to get out there. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to play. It's just tough because you see these injuries pile up. This is a second significant kind of abdomen injury in the first 4 weeks. That's not a good sign. I think at a certain point, you just need to let him rest and get to the end of the season, hopefully at some level of productivity. But that's going to be a Guardian vest on him, huh? Like a Guardian vest. They got the Guardian helmet. Can we get the Guardian vest for Taysom? Well, they will wear like basically Kevlar vests, like a bulletproof vest. But a lot of times you'll see a quarterback wear that because they don't need to be particularly mobile. It's a little tougher when you're a player that needs to be able to move. Right. And especially with the level of contact that Taysom takes on a given play, it's tough to say like, oh yeah, he'll play and he's just got to be careful. Like he doesn't know any other way. So that's something. But
resting him to make sense too, obviously, because after this week you got the Tampa Bay Bucks and obviously the divisional matchup,
and it's a short week. But resting him makes sense other than the fact that this offense has looked completely different with him on the field compared to when he was off the field, right? Like you played the Eagles, he wasn't out there and the offense was stuck in the mud. Now, there were a lot of reasons for that, but one of the major reasons was you didn't have Taysom Hill, right? You looked like you were going to hang 40 on the Falcons when he was in there, and then he came out and suddenly the offense got stuck in the mud. So I don't know. Maybe that's just coincidental. Maybe it's you go into a week with a different kind of plan and it doesn't affect you as much as it did in week 4, but it's hard to look past that. He just seems like one of the major pieces that makes this offense go. Yeah,
obviously, you mentioned with the Eagles a kind of a similar beefy defensive line you're going to have to face this week too, which is always a problem.
No question. Speaking of the defensive line, 2 offensive linemen on this list of DMPs. You had guard Cesar Ruiz, still has not practiced as of Friday morning. Now that could change on Friday and Saturday, but he had not practiced as of Friday morning, dealing with that knee issue. And Shane Lemieux, center guard, came out of that game late. Wasn't sure exactly what he was dealing with. Didn't seem super significant. Dennis Allen kind of said, hey, it's nothing that's major, but he's dealing with an ankle injury. He didn't practice on Wednesday. And if there's any question about his availability, that kind of throws everything you have into flux, because this is a guy who has dealt with injuries in the past. He dealt with an ankle injury in the preseason. So where does that leave you? You can't count on Caesar to be the backup center. So you're looking at, okay, we're going to shift Lucas Patrick if that has to be the case. And then if Shane can't go, you're like, okay, who's the next guy? Probably Kyle Hergel. Chris Reed on the practice squad is another option. But yeah, those injuries start to pile up really quick.
And just at the worst possible position, I feel like, we had the big question marks with O-line. They looked like they obviously got some things together early on in the season. Even some of the grades out there from not just PFF, other places, on a guy like Trevor Penning have been way higher than anybody could have imagined. But man, they just keep taking those dings, and you obviously worried about that going up against this Spags defense in prime time.
Yeah, Trevor has been better in pass pro than I think people expected. He struggled in the run game last week, so we'll see how that goes. He's got to do both well, and you got to be able to run the ball, and that's the key. You got to be able to run the ball, right? Because when you can run the ball.
You mentioned with Hergel, definitely interested to see if he can get his way into the lineup, because I know he was called up from the practice squad last week, but wasn't used.
Yeah, I mean, he's the last resort. You're not using him unless you have to, but he would be the backup center if Shane is not available. Now, again, like I was saying, like Trevor has been better in pass pro than run blocking to this point, probably. But you got to be able to run the ball, because if you can't run the ball effectively, then I don't care if you're improved in pass pro. If they can pin their ears back and come after you, you're going to have a hard time if you're Trevor Penning. So either way, you got to do that. Now, the next 2 on this list, the final 2 DMPs are kind of weird because you didn't really expect it. Neither guy left last week with an injury, but you got defensive end Peyton Turner dealing with a knee issue. Hopefully that's minor. It didn't seem like anything major, so ideally it's just maintenance. I expect him to be a big part of that defensive end rotation. I thought he had a solid day.
Sadly, that's not surprising to see Peyton Turner for me. It's like, once again, the same old story, unfortunately, with him being on the injured list.
See, that's not fair, though, because he hasn't missed any time yet. Like that annoys me, because it's like he's been healthy. He's worked through injuries. So can we give the guy a day?
All right. We'll see. I'll reserve my judgment for pregame.
Right. Like, we don't need to shit talk the guy for missing a day of practice. Let's see what happened first. He could be back out there on Friday. Like, that's every time he misses he shows up on any injury report at all. Oh my God. Like, come on, give the guy a chance. I don't know. I think he's played well. Hopefully he can battle through it, right? That's been the question in the past. Is he going to play through the injuries? And I don't know. I think it's unfair to give him shit about that. But either way, Blake Grupe is probably the more interesting name. Yeah. Dealing with a right hip issue. We did see Charlie Smith kick during the open media portion of practice yesterday. So, and that's interesting because typically we don't see any kicks. So maybe they're just making sure if Blake can't go, or maybe this is the plan all along. You're going to have Charlie Smith kick in the outdoor games.
No, it's I mean, you didn't see Grupe take a shot or anything last game, right?
No, and I mean, it's probably just the maintenance thing. It's probably just like, hey, we want to give the guy a day off, and you have to put him on the injury report if you want to give the guy a day off. That's just the rules. Maybe his hip is sore. I don't know. Like, he dealt with some soreness last year, but it is his right hip, so that's his kicking hip. Right. So I don't know, but all right.
If you had like left elbow for group, you're like, no big deal.
Right. Yeah. It's like if your left hand, if you're a quarterback, you're like, okay, like he throws with the other hand. So, I don't care if he broke his left pinky, we'll be fine. But all right, let's go to the other side. Limited. Offensive tackle Taliesin Fuaga still dealing with that back issue. It's a maintenance thing, is going to continue to show up on injury reports. I'm not worried about it. He was limited. Running back Alvin Kamara, same injury as last week, played through it. So the fact that he's out there on Thursday at all, first day of practice, is a good sign.
The man does not need ribs to play.
Does not need ribs to play. Full participation, Chris Olave, Cedric Wilson, hamstring, ankle. So that's a good thing. Not worried about them missing the week. But then you got a few interesting names. So A.T. Perry returned to practice. That's a good thing. He went out midweek with a hamstring injury. Jawan Johnson appeared on the injury report with a forearm injury, which is interesting because I don't know how you can injure your forearm without it being kind of structural, right? Like, well, what can you do to your forearm to be a significant injury? So that'll be one to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he has a fracture or something. And I expect he'd try to play through it if he did. But
man, the Falcons busted up some bones.
Yeah, since it's just a CVS receipt of injuries here.
Yeah.
And then Brian Brzee left with an ankle injury, or was limited with an ankle injury. That actually happened on the play that he kind of broke through and pressured Kirk Cousins during that game. You could see him kind of wincing a little bit. I don't think it's anything significant. I think he kind of just rolled it as he jumped over the offensive lineman that he had, destroyed. There's a clip of that play that people are like, wow, that man has a family. But that's the play he got hurt on. So, he did affect that play. It was a nice rush by him. But that's just NFL, man. You get hurt. One more bit of good news. Tyrann Mathieu, not on this list.
True.
And it feels kind of disingenuous because he's definitely dealing with something, right? He's dealt with a heel injury. He's dealt with a calf injury. He had a groin injury in that game. They're all kind of related, but I do think that's kind of just projecting. Like, Tyrann Mathieu's not missing this game. His leg could be falling off his body. He's not missing this game.
Yeah, the honey badger's like Wolverine. He can just regenerate.
Well, I mean, he's just not going to miss the chance to go back and play Kansas City. Like, in no universe is he missing this game. So it's like, don't even bother listening to me on the injury report because there is a 100% chance I play in this game. Because that's really what it is. Like, you list guys on the injury report. So, for example, Chris Olave, full participant with a hamstring injury. If you were to not list Chris Olave on the injury report all week, and then he wakes up Monday morning and says, I can't play, then the league will kind of be like, you were lying.
Where did this come from, right?
So like them not listing Tyrann is them basically saying like he's gonna friggin' play.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that you mentioned a name that you thought you'd see on there because of all the things that Tyrann's taken, but man, I just love obviously the leadership that we've talked about this in the locker room, and gonna need him for sure in a territory at least he knows tons about.
Yeah, maybe they just ran out of room and they were like, Tyrann, can you mind if we just don't list you? Like, yeah, you're good. We got too many names on here already. But all right, the last name on this injury report.
Or maybe they also forgot him like they forgot DeMario at first.
Well, they could have added him. They added DeMario. Okay, so on the other side, you're looking at Mike Dana, defensive end, calf issue, limited. Kareem Hunt, shoulder issue, limited. Mecole Hardman, knee issue, limited. And then Nick Bolton has a hamstring, but he was a full participant. Defensive tackle Derek Nottie, triceps issue, full participant. So there's a few names on there to watch.
Tough year to be a Chiefs wide receiver.
Yeah, well, the name that's not on here is Rashee Rice, who's been sent to injured reserve. So there are a few names of guys that are hurt that are not appearing on this injury list, but that's because they're already gone. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, or is he already gone? Hollywood Brown is the
Brown, right?
Who's been hurt. But all right, the final name on this list for the Saints, Kendre Miller. Back to practice. Good sign. I'd personally be surprised if he's ready to play on Sunday, but maybe there's just no choice. Maybe you just don't have the luxury of saying, let's ramp him up, and we just got to have to throw him out there and see what he's got. This is what Dennis Allen said when he was asked on Thursday.
Well, he practiced today, and so we'll just see how he goes, throughout the course of the week, and I think we'll just kind of evaluate where he's at kind of on a day-to-day basis.
What would his return add?
I don't know yet. I would be hopeful that it would add another playmaker to our team, another guy that can be explosive for us. And I'm hopeful that that's what that is. But I think we need to see him practice, see him perform. I thought he had a good practice today. I thought he did some good things. So it was good to have him back out there.
Thought he did some good things.
I just love the fact that when he was asked, what do you think he can add? And it's like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know right now.
And that's kind of, we talked earlier this season, this offseason about like, I don't know if he can handle the offense. We haven't seen him in it. So like personally, I didn't ask him this question yesterday because I wouldn't have gotten an answer yesterday. And if I try to ask him the same question on Thursday and Saturday, he'd probably get annoyed and not answer it on Saturday either. So I didn't ask him this question today, but I do intend to ask him on Saturday because I feel like with Kendre, it's going to be less about whether he can physically do it and more about whether you trust him in the offense.
For sure.
Right? Like, how could you possibly trust him in like any complex pass protection scenario? Any play where he has to like understand the checks and like. I just feel like if he plays on Monday, it's going to be a very, very limited set of plays. And the problem with that is it can't be a tell when you put that guy on the field, like he's definitely going to get the ball because you don't trust him to do anything else, right? Like if they don't believe that you'll trust Kendre Miller in a pass pro set, then you put him on the field, they know it's a run. So I just think it's going to be tough to get him on the field this week, but I do think that you kind of just, I don't know. You need someone who has some burst, and hopefully he has that. So either way,
like you mentioned, I'd like to see him, and I think 5 to 7 touches maybe he ends up getting, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd more expect to see him be a more incorporated piece in week 6, right? But either way, getting him back on the field now is a good sign because it means that he's healthy enough to practice. You're going to get out there and you're going to see what he has. And hopefully throughout the course of this season, whether this week or not, you'll be able to take some of that workload off of Alvin and put it to Kendre. And hopefully this is kind of served as a wake-up call for him.
Yeah, if you want to upset Dennis Allen, just ask him about Kendre Miller. He does not seem to be like to talk fondly of the man.
Well, that's why I'm not going to ask it. Like, I want to ask him on a day that I think he'll actually answer it, which is like, does Kendre understand the offense? Do you feel like what, like, I'm going to ask him straight up. I was like, for Kendre Miller, is it more about being physically ready or being mentally ready? And I'm fascinated to see how he handles answering that question because he seems incapable of pulling a punch when it comes to Kendre Miller.
He'll probably say, "Oh, you should ask Clint about that."
I guess I could ask Clint about that. We'll talk to him later today. One more thing, and I'm not going to play Derek Carr's clip because I'll just tell you, Derek Carr said, "Hey, I talk to Davante Adams regularly. I'd love to play with Davante Adams, but we don't talk shop. We talk about our next trip to Cabo or whatever." Like he said, he had texted Davante this week, but it was about something that if you saw it, you would just make fun of him. Like it's not about football. So like he wouldn't tell us if there was, but it doesn't sound like there's any recruiting going on. Though, like, I don't think he necessarily has to recruit. Like, the Saints are in a position where, and we talked about this extensively, we don't have to go through it a ton, but Saints are in a position where they have a wide receivers coach who's basically been a father figure to Davante and Keith Williams, recruited him to Fresno State, coached him at Fresno State, has worked with him throughout the offseason. So, like, it's not a question of whether it would work out if you did trade for him. The question is whether it makes sense to trade for him. And that's why I think Dennis Allen's answer is more important in this conversation. One other note, Derek Carr is appealing his Michael Jackson fine. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, he should. That was nonsense. But with Davante, I could see him at least asking Derek about the situation in New Orleans. Is he truly happy there? The coaching, the franchise, you being treated well, or am I going to get there and shit, you're going to ask to get out of there on your own? Are you going to be left around here too if there were things to happen?
Sure, but it's just like, regardless, Derek's going to try to sell him on it. You know, Derek's not going to be like, no, stay away. He's not Amon-Ra St. Brown. But this is what Dennis Allen said when he was kind of broached on the subject, kind of vaguely, hey, how do you feel about your wide receiver room, and would you add to it?
How do you feel about your receiving core, and would you consider adding to it?
I like our receiving core. I think we got some good young players that I feel really good about, and I think they're taking a step up. I thought, both Chris and Shaheed did some good things in the game the other day against Atlanta. So I like our receivers. I like our team. If there's ever an opportunity that we feel like makes sense to help our team, we're going to try to help our team. But I like our receiver room.
Do you like the receiver room?
No, I hate it. They're terrible. We're definitely out there looking for somebody.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what he's going to say. At the same time, I kind of agree. Like, I feel like my take on this situation is not, hey, the Saints would not be better if they added Davante Adams. Any NFL team would improve if they added a guy like Davante Adams.
True.
The question is, do you feel like you need to add a Davante Adams? And I don't know, like, I feel like from what we've seen with the Saints, the issue has not been the top line of the wide receiver room. Like, I think Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed have played really well. Like, obviously fielding a punt is not something that impacts you as a wide receiver. That's going to mar your image of that game for Rashid Shaheed. But if you just take that play out and just focus on what he did as a receiver, that was one of his best games of his career. 8 catches, 83 yards. Like, to this point, he's had big games where he's gone over the top and made big plays getting behind the defense. But that's the first game I can remember seeing him like legitimately moving the chains or like consistently and being that reliable option on third down when they're clamping on Olave and you get one-on-one coverage and you win. I'd like to see him stay on his feet. He had to go to the ground too many times to catch balls. And part of that is just the ball's low and maybe Derek's trying to protect him from taking a hit. But like, to me, that's the thing. It's like, I like the wide receiver room. Now I need more down the line. I need A.T. Perry to show the hell up. I need Cedric Wilson to make a play or two and take some of that attention off of those guys. I need the tight end room to show up. But I don't think the Saints need to make this trade in order to get the production out of their wide receivers. Because, you look at the PFF numbers and Chris Olave and Derek Carr are the top 2 rated quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL. If you take any stock in PFF's numbers, which you don't have to, I'm just telling you that exists. So I don't know. I kind of feel that I think that is the appropriate answer. Like, yeah, we'll add a guy if we feel like the deal is there and it makes sense to do, but it's not going to be because, oh man, we don't like our wide receivers. We got to go get. This isn't the 2021 season where you're looking at Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway and you're like, oh no, what is happening?
Yeah, like you said, Davante is obviously an upgrade, but you have the top scoring offense in the NFL right now without him. Would love to have the guy on the team, but if there were other pieces that I could pick ahead of wide receiver, I'm definitely looking at offensive lineman, defensive lineman as something that I need a hell of a lot more. Davante Adams, it's crazy to say, is more of a luxury for this team right now. And
yeah, I want to retain my.
If you can do it, sure, let's pull it off. But I don't think you mortgage away a ton of the future for it.
Right. If I want to retain my flexibility at this point, and it's a situation where if there was no interest and you were the team that was like, yeah, we'll give you a 4th round pick, take it or leave it. And then they were like, sure, fine. Okay. Then I think, yeah, okay, we'll figure out a way. If it's like, I got to give up a 2nd round pick and a player I like, no, it's
goodbye, right.
It's not the type, like it's not all or nothing. But either way, I thought DA handled that well. I think DA has actually had a pretty good season at the podium to this point. Now, he gets a lot of flack for a lot of shit. I think he's gotten better at that part of his game. Take that for what it is.
We're going to have to get like a montage, I guess, of DA's best at the podium.
No, we don't. We don't need to do that. I'm not saying he's been great. I'm just saying he's been better. Anyway.
He's had some little like kind of like dad joke zings he's put in, at times too. So I think that it would be a funny reel.
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. It was a long one, but hey, that's what happens when the injury report shows up on a Thursday. We're going to close out this segment. We're going to come back with Dan Portillo, host of the Fastest 40 podcast, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. Give us a lowdown on, who's the wide receiver to watch. Is it Xavier Worthy? Is it anyone else? Sky Moore? I don't know. Who are these guys? Is Travis Kelce really just had all of his life force sapped away by Taylor Swift? I almost said Taysom Hill. And is his career over, or is it just a kind of a bait and switch? Like, we've been hiding him and he's going to show up and go for 203 touchdowns against the Saints. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but he's going to help us out with that information. Who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Otherwise, we will be right back. And even if you don't subscribe, we'll still be right back. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller as always. And we're bringing in Dan Portillo, host of the Fastest 40, covering a podcast covering the Chiefs, formerly covering 40-yard dash times. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan_TF40. And we're here to talk about the Chiefs. We're previewing Saints 2-2 at Chiefs 4-0, and that 4-0 is just all the Chiefs do is win. Even in games, it feels like they probably should lose. Something seems to go their way. It's just who they are. They live a blessed life. And how are you feeling, Dan? It's early in the morning. We're recording this in advance, just in case anyone was wondering why my eyes look like I literally just woke up. It's because I did, but that's okay. But in Chiefs land, how are things right now? How are you feeling about this team? Does feel like there's a little bit more of a question mark around this roster than there might have been in years past.
Yeah, and last year there were a lot of questions around the offense, and I think going into the season, Chiefs fans had a sense that those questions were addressed, right, with the draft and acquisition of Hollywood Brown, and how they had kind of just invested in new skill position players and weapons for Patrick Mahomes. Well, fast forward to week 5, and a lot of those guys that were acquired through the draft through various means, not going to be suiting up. No Rashee Rice, no Hollywood Brown, no Isaiah Pacheco, another guy who's been a staple in the run game. So I think those questions are back, right? And they've been winning ugly. Now they're winning, which is great, but they're winning ugly in a lot of sense, and kind of using the defense as a crutch. And luckily they've been as good as they've been. But there's a lot of questions that fans have, and I think anyone watching the Chiefs would be concerned about.
One thing that has been a constant, though, going into this year, that was a big factor last year, the Chiefs defense. And I know there's Saints fans scratching their heads, wondering how the heck has Steve Spagnuolo been a wizard over in Kansas City when he was the defensive coordinator here for 1 year, ended up with the worst defense in the history of the NFL, giving up yardage. But just what has he meant? I mean, obviously been huge for this defensive squad, but what is it about Spags that he's got clicking on all cylinders with the Chiefs? I know their drafts have been phenomenal.
Yeah, that really helps, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Scouting the right guys, getting Brett Veach and company up there in the front office to pick the players that are going to fit the scheme the best, and also pulling any of those intangibles out of them. I think what's helped him a ton, we still give up a good amount of yards. The Chiefs still allow, they're more of a bend, don't break defense, right? They can sack the quarterback. They can bring these disguised pressures out to make people uncomfortable. But really, what I think the biggest difference maker maybe for Spags with the Chiefs as opposed to other teams is the draft, right? Homegrown players who come up in the system, and ultimately most of the guys that are contributing on the defensive side of the ball, maybe minus Drew Tranquill and Justin Reed, were actually drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Charles Omenihu, when we get him back, he'll fall into that category too. But everyone else that has grown within the Chiefs system has only known Spags. And so I think that helps a ton with just the continuity and getting that ultimate message out of what I think Spags is trying to achieve on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, see, Steve and I have very different memories of Spags because I grew up watching the Giants. So I remember Spags as the Super Bowl defensive coordinator. He was only down here for a year. And so there's this idea that Spags is this terrible defensive coordinator down here. And I'm like, guys, he's not that bad. He just sucked here. I remember him as like the inventor of the NASCAR package. Like everyone talks about the NASCAR package now, but he's the guy who like threw Justin Tuck and Yossi Umenyiora inside and be like, you rush the passer from there. And suddenly it became a thing that all NFL teams do. But no, I do. This Chiefs defense does remind me a lot of the Saints defense. They actually have a lot of the same principles in that, yeah, you draft a lot of these defensive players, you build the cornerback and like it's a very similar, like aggressive man kind of scheme, I think. Right. Like, but I do want to focus a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. Cause I'm just curious, like, what is this offense going to be without Rashee Rice? Like, are you going to rely on Kareem Hunt? Is it going to be Xavier Worthy go routes? Like, what exactly is going to be the identity of this offense, would you say? And obviously, you got some of that last week after Pat Mahomes decided to wipe out Rashee in that collision. Like, what do you expect them to do without those guys?
Man, I'm hoping that they can lean on Kareem Hunt a little bit more in Kansas City. The way he came out of the gate and started rushing about 5 yards a carry roughly by the end of that game, it looked like he didn't have as much rust as maybe we were thinking initially, right? And so if the Chiefs can lean on that run game because of how reliable Isaiah Pacheco has been for the offense, it's helped open things up in the passing game too. Now, my biggest question is, Travis Kelce was kind of non-existent the first 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, week 4, no Rashee Rice, and he has the best game he's had all season, basically doubling his output up to that point. That's going to be something that'll be critical, and I think scheming up plays to get Travis Kelce the ball more. It almost felt like what Andy Reid's done previously with some of the veterans is kind of saved them for the postseason. Right. We saw that with Jerick McKinnon whenever he came to Kansas City out of the backfield. And so it almost felt like maybe that was the thing they were doing. Because I don't know, I've been conditioned here in Kansas City to take what I hear in the media and press conferences with a grain of salt, because it's like, oh, this person's injured, we're not going to make this move over here. And then a lot of times the opposite happens. Right. Oh, we're not intentionally running plays so McKinnon's not on the field. That's just the way the game script has rolled. No, I don't buy it. And I feel like that's going to be something where if they were planning on saving Kelce, then that's scrapped. That's gone. It's going to have to be something where you're running the offense through him like what we've seen previously. But some of these other guys have to step up. Sky Moore has not been able to answer the bell on all of those plays. We saw that on a little out route for a short conversion, and a little bit later in the game, same scenario, Xavier Worthy steps up and gets it done. So leaning on him is going to be critical as well.
So your theory is not that Taylor Swift has sapped the life force out of Travis Kelce, and that he's like a Space Jam like scenario where he is just no longer good at football. You don't think that's the case, just to be clear.
As much as I would love to see a football with Travis Kelce's talent floating around in it, and whoever touches it next gets that talent, I do not think that is the theory, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Yeah, look for that football right now.
the hot takes are crazy. They're calling, Travis Kelce suddenly they're saying is washed. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really, this is your take?
I have some tinfoil upstairs. If anyone needs any, I'll loan it out to you.
All right.
Looking at the run game, obviously we've talked about the injuries there as well. Dealing with Pacheco was a huge blow. I thought he was going to be a monster, obviously, in fantasy football this year. But what's the status going into this week of a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I know he is available to come back. I don't know if he'll be game ready, though.
That would be surprising to see him game ready, or even if he is game ready, let's just say if he got more than, 20% of the snap count, right. I would be surprised about that. Clyde really hasn't been a huge difference maker for this offense traditionally. I think leaning on guys like Kareem Hunt and Carson Steele seem more likely than Clyde. Even Pirine has more value in the passing game than Clyde brings to the table. The biggest thing Clyde has going for him is the history within the offense, the chemistry with some of the other guys. Maybe he has that built up a little bit more. But, I think more than anything, the Chiefs brought him back just to add some depth instead of going and grabbing another veteran guy, which they ended up having to do due to Pacheco's injury anyway. So,
all right. Now, well, I'll go back to the defensive side now. I feel like when we talk about this defense, everyone, it's kind of like the Rams with Aaron Donald. Everyone just talks about Chris Jones as if like he's the infinity stone of this defense, and there's no stopping him. Record. Yeah, and so we don't need to talk about Chris Jones. We know about Chris Jones. If you're looking at another player on this defense and saying, okay, that's the X factor, that's the guy that other teams should be looking out for, and maybe people don't talk about him because of the supernova that is Chris Jones, like kind of overshadowing everybody else, who would it be and why?
Man, I want to say Trent McDuffie, but I think a lot of people know about what he can bring to the table at this point. I just wish the guy would catch a freaking interception for once. That's kind of the big thing for the defensive backside of the ball. But two other guys that maybe a lot of people aren't watching right now that I'll note. Leo Chenal has been an animal from the linebacker position, and they're really using him in a lot of different ways, whether it's a blitz package, whether he's lined up in coverage. He's kind of a guy you're familiar with now, Willie Gay, the replacement for him as this super uber athletic linebacker that they can just put anywhere. He's been making critical plays in the backfield, whether it's attacking on a screen pass or tracking down the running back on a sweep or whatever it is. He's been taking some very significant steps forward where I think he can be a big piece down the stretch. But then also Shamari Connor. Shamari Connor has kind of filled into the L'Jarius Sneed role after he departed for Tennessee, and has been critical on those blitz packages, even coming up with a sack already this season. But he's been great in coverage too, forcing a turnover here and there, and then breaking up passes, and he's been really solid in coverage as well, which is critical for a Spags defense. You can't let those guys behind you, and he's been good about it.
What's been the mood amongst Chiefs fans with this year? I know obviously 4-0 is great, but I can imagine fans are still probably a little bit, put off of the way they're winning because it's been like a grind out, quote unquote, ugly wins. But I'll take a win any way you can get them. But just curious, the general feeling of Chiefs Nation right now.
No, we love to win. Like that's, I think everyone does, right?
Yeah, it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, when you can blow a team out, it feels a little bit better on your heart, right? I think everyone's kind of going up a few resting beats per minute around here in Kansas City. But all in all, it's like you walk away from the game and feel like fans are almost feeling kind of like annoyed almost. I think we're a little spoiled here in the 913-816 area codes.
Sure.
With the way they've won traditionally, it's been a situation where they can put up the points or they're shutting you down with their defense. And while the defense is still holding up their end of the bargain, I think the offense has been struggling quite a bit. I mean, even with the guys being healthy, right? Having Pacheco, having Rashee Rice, Mahomes hasn't looked as accurate or as comfortable as he has in years past, at least from what I've noticed. I mean, just take a look at the first pass of Travis Kelce in that Chargers game. It's miles above his head. And I mean, those guys have the best chemistry on the team between a pass catcher and quarterback. So, just with the wild errant throws, maybe some of the questionable decisions about, Mahomes flushing the pocket a little bit too soon, that's kind of put them in a few sticky situations where I think if you look back on the plays that have made the offense look a little rough, you can kind of look at 15, which is not the way things have gone traditionally. So he looked like he cleaned it up quite a bit at the second half of that Chargers game and kind of got his head out of his you-know-what and, was able to put together the win. But the ugly wins, right, that's going to be something where it's like, oh, no, here we go again last year, squeak our way into the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's
right.
Too bad of a deal if that's what happens. But, pressure's on to do the three-peat and kind of become, in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased, one of the best dynasties to touch sports because they'd be accomplishing something that no other team has been able to do in this league.
Definitely in the modern era too. It's been impressive, obviously.
Yeah.
Right, like they've been playing football for a long time. No one's done something that's there.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's and you dealt with this with the Patriots. You didn't, but we did at large. Like when you win so many games, the way the Chiefs have won so many games over the past 8 years, right? You start to feel bulletproof in that, like, these are close games. Like all 4 of these games, like feasibly, a team that didn't understand how to win close games could be 0-4. Right? The Saints are 2-2 in a situation where they could be 4-0, but they fell flat on the last drive or the final 2 possessions, whatever you want to say, of back-to-back games, right? And that's the difference. Like I think a lot of people lose perspective on, hey, winning is a skill, right? Like knowing how to win close games is an ability. It's a learned ability. And that's why you see some teams win in those situations constantly and some teams lose in those situations constantly. And I just feel like the Chiefs with Pat Mahomes, with Andy Reid, there's just this inherent confidence that that's going to happen in situations that are, you would say they're 50-50. Like, but I feel like when the Chiefs get in a 50-50 situation, it's really like 70-30.
Yeah, there's no situation too dire for this team, I think, at least mentally, right? They handle that with confidence. Anytime it's because they've seen themselves do it before, right? Whether you're talking about get down the field in 13 seconds, kick the field goal and get the job done, or, the guys, Mahomes is 12-0 if you've been down 10 points exactly in his career. So,
wait, what? Is that true?
That is 100% true. So those are different scenarios that kind of come into play where it's like, oh, this is just another day for their team. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, you can pick them. I think on the New Heights podcast, they call it LeBron stats because you just kind of cherry pick these scenarios, right, to build up a GOAT case. And, that's definitely something where it's like, okay, we can look back at these games in which we face this exact scenario and come out on top and enter it with confidence. So I think that's a great point for sure.
I'm definitely envious of Jeff this week. He gets to go on the road with the team. He's the sideline reporter for the Saints radio network. So
Very nice.
A trip to Arrowhead Stadium, I've always been dying to go. Just here, it's one of the loudest venues you will ever attend, even though there's no dome on this sucker. Just curious, the passion, the power that you feel in that stadium. What can he expect in Monday night? I mean, a prime time game too at night in Arrowhead. That whole atmosphere. What's that buzz going to be like?
Oh yeah, it'll probably be. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. Usually this time of the year it's a little brisk.
Not terrible
though. You get out there in the tailgate lot, you smell all the smokers going.
Yeah.
There's music playing everywhere. You're probably going to get a few chants thrown at you, but it's unlike anything else I've experienced. I've had an opportunity to go to a few other stadiums and see what the scene's like there too. But once you're actually on the field, I think you actually feel the weight of the stadium whenever that noise is coming out. I mean, your head could be buzzing after it. And oddly enough, Derek Carr is on your team. And since you guys will be coming back, there's a little familiarity there. So I'm sure crowd is going to be ready to let him have it and remind him what Arrowhead is all about. Not to mention a couple other reunions with Tyrann Mathieu, Willie Gay, and a few other players on that defensive side of the ball for the Saints. So I think knowing those guys are coming into town is going to make the Chiefs fans get up a little bit more than what they would for an NFC opponent for sure.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. Like by my count, it's like Derek Carr's 8th game in that building, which is a crazy number for any single quarterback to go play one team on the road. But I guess my question was for guys like, because it's not even just Tyrann Mathieu. They also have like Ugo Amadi played with y'all for a spell. Tano Passanio is hurt right now, but he played there. I think there's one. Oh, Colin Saunders is the other guy that I'm trying to think of. Yeah. So what do you think the reception is going to be for those guys? I'm just curious. I know Willie's the juice man, right? Like Willie was the hype guy.
Oh, yeah.
So do you expect cheers? Do you expect boos? What do you expect for those guys?
Well, I don't think we're going to play swag surf for them anymore.
Yeah.
But those guys won championships here in Kansas City. They have Super Bowl rings. Tyrann Mathieu in particular played a huge role in turning that defensive unit around. when he came over from, I believe it was from Houston, that they got him. So I think the reception is going to be well. I don't know that these guys necessarily wanted to leave. It's kind of the business of football that will push those guys out, unfortunately. But I don't think there's any ill will between the fans and the team and those guys that had to depart. Yeah, I mean, anytime you get somebody that's coming back, right? A reunion game. Tyreek Hill came back in the wild card game against the Chiefs with the Dolphins last year, and I know people were passionate about that in the stands, being there for that -30 game. So there's all of those elements that I think, obviously you're going to want to leave with a win, and there's maybe a little motivation for that, but there's not going to be any ill will for sure.
Yeah, I kind of feel it's like my high school reunions. I don't mind going as long as I win the reunion, then I'm fine with it. Right?
All I need to leave with is a W from the reunion. We're good.
All right. Thanks so much, Dan Portillo, host of the Fastest 40 podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, who the Saints play on Sunday in Kansas City. I'm going to have to wear a coat, maybe a light jacket, maybe a windbreaker of some kind, but I'm looking forward to it. Follow Dan at Dan_TF40. And thanks so much, man. Appreciate your time.
Jeff, Steve, I appreciate you guys as well. Enjoy your trip up in Kansas City, Jeff. Make sure you go to Joe's KC Barbecue. There you go. Get you a Z-Man.
Z-Man. Got it. Writing it down.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you, Dan.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again to Dan Portillo. I think I said his name wrong that last time, so I'll correct it. Portillo for coming on. Got the 2 L's in there. Great stuff on the Chiefs. I think it's going to be a good matchup. Like he kind of talked about, the Chiefs are 4-0. It's been a little kind of on this edge of your seat. I think they're primed for a loss personally. I think that you win a bunch of close games, you're dealing with injuries, and, Derek Carr has traditionally played pretty well in that building. I feel okay about it. We'll see. But like I said, you kind of feel bulletproof. That stat, I need to look up that stat. He's 10-0 in games and he's trailed by 10 points. What the hell? How is that possible? He was a rookie at one point.
Anything, you hear with the Chiefs, like you said, you can pull these stats or whatever fun facts you have about them. They seem completely ridiculous with them. Mahomes and Andy Reid, that combination have seemed to have been magical. Obviously, Andy, very lucky, I would say, to land a guy like Mahomes because his exit in Philadelphia was not so great.
No, was it after the Super Bowl? When did he leave Philadelphia? I can't recall. What was the...
He left Philly, I forget, after getting bounced in the NFC Championship for, I forget how many, was it not three straight, but like a third time. And, they went through some not so great head coaches after Andy left, especially one of my favorites, Chip Kelly, was an abomination. Yeah, but
I remember Chip, yeah.
I felt like he was trying to single-handedly undermine the franchise, getting rid of...
Chip had a 3-game stretch where everyone was like, this is the answer. Nick Foles threw 7 touchdown passes in 1 game. And
what do you know? Nick Foles ended up coming back and doing the magical run with Philly. But no, with Andy, I was not, as an Eagles fan, not on the get rid of Andy bus. He had them as a consistent contender year in and year out. But always the knock was, always the bridesmaid, never the bride for the Eagles under Reid. And, well, he had Donovan McNabb, not too bad of a quarterback, but the receivers in Philly are always terrible.
Yeah.
Now you see what, though, you're able to do. Patrick Mahomes still able to create. Obviously, it's not been at the highest of levels without his guys, but obviously a huge concern there. And I think that the demise of Travis Kelce has been way too exaggerated.
Yeah, I think Dan's probably onto something that maybe I don't know. Maybe he wasn't playing as sharp as he's been, but I also think part of it is probably you're trying to, when you're a team that
we don't need him right now.
When you're a team that's in the Chiefs situation, you have to be thinking about the Super Bowl at all times. Like your plans have to end with, and then we win the Super Bowl, right? You don't. Your plans can't be, we're gonna do it. We're gonna worry about this week and then move on to the next. Now if you don't, you could get to the NFC Championship or the AFC Championship, you lose. That's a failure. So like, you've lost that's the negative of being as successful as they are. Anything short of a championship is an abject failure. And the funny thing is, I remember my vivid memory of Andy Reid in Philadelphia is that terrible clock management on that final drive of the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
Like, I think Donovan McNabb is like throwing up or something like, and then I remember Terrell Owens playing through like a terrible ankle injury and putting up like 200 yards in a game. I remember that too. But
the good old T.O. days.
Was he on the Cowboys when he ate the popcorn? Was he on the Eagles when he ate the popcorn? It must have been the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't think he did the popcorn deal. I think that was not in Philly.
I think he was genuinely losing his mind because he was also like, that's my quarterback.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was popcorn.
Fun times. That's what, in the driveway doing his bench press.
No, I was doing sit-ups.
The sit-ups. Okay.
Doing interviews while he was doing sit-ups. Just showing off like I still got these abs. But yeah, no, I think it's gonna be a fun game. And I recommend that some folks go back and watch some of the highlights of Raiders Chiefs when Derek Carr was balling in that building. Cause like I feel like people think I'm making this up. They've had some duels. He and Pat Mahomes have had some legit duels in those matchups. And he's come out on the right side a few times. Now his record against the Chiefs is not good overall. But I think you could look back and when we talk about, well, this defense was really letting him down, those matchups were pretty indicative. I think one of the ones they won, he had to score like 48 points, or they had to score 48 points just to come out on top. Like there was multiple games they dropped 30 plus and lost. So
we need week 1 and 2, Derek, on Monday night.
We do. I'm excited about it, but all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back, close out this here podcast with some X factors. One of the reasons I didn't want to ask Dan about a ton of injury questions is because we don't have a ton of the injury report yet. So we're kind of going to be guessing on how the end of it will shape up. We're recording this prior to Friday's injury report, which is actually the second injury report of the week. So there's a lot that could change, right? Last week, guys got hurt in practice. And so by the end of the week, we were just like, well, where'd they go? But we'll figure it out. Either way, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. Thanks for hanging out. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller.
Hey.
I said that like The Price is Right. You think I have a future in The Price?
I imagine literally myself running down the aisle, going to the podium to bid on whatever.
Would you be the person who bets like $100 and 1 penny?
No, I don't know, but I'd definitely be like, I'll do $1.
I would just genuinely be like, I think it costs $1. Right?
Give me a buck.
Rolex watch. Yeah. Anyway, so speaking of The Price is Right, the price is wrong on the Saints when they need to get a stop in the final moments of a game. That's not been the case for the Chiefs. We're going to break down X factors. How did the Saints go into Arrowhead and win this game? It's going to be a tough environment. Like we talked to Dennis Allen about it. We talked to Derek Carr about it. They both described it as kind of like a college-like atmosphere. And I think that is kind of fair. I think that's a good way to describe it. Like I don't describe the Superdome as a college-like atmosphere, right? It's, something about being outdoors and just kind of having that like, oh, they've all been in the parking lot drinking and eating brats all morning. And now they're just going to, I guess not all morning, but all day. And now they're going to walk into the stadium with, I don't know. It just feels a little different. At least when I watch it, I've never been there, so I can't tell you for sure. But when I watch it on TV, like I feel that.
Surrounding the stadium's kind of like in Tiger Stadium, you know, that kind of atmosphere with the food too.
Exactly. So I don't know. I just think that's probably a good way to describe it. And it's going to be a difficult place to play. Now, one of my offensive X factor, we'll get into offensive X factors first, and then I want to talk a lot about Chris Jones. But my offensive X factor is, hey, is this going to be the game that Derek Carr shows us? Hey, well, I am the guy. I can show up in these big moments and execute. And I don't know, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I will say that he has about as much experience as there is possible to have playing in that building. He even said like
Spags defense too.
Yeah. He even said like there's a specific person that yells at him every time, and he knows he's going to go in there and that guy's going to say some really mean shit
about his family.
It's getting nasty. It hasn't always gone well. Derek Carr in his career has a 3-14 record against the Chiefs. But you kind of dive into that a little more, and it's not necessarily, okay, the quarterback struggling. You look at the last 4 games Derek Carr played in that stadium. So that goes back to, I want to say 2020. And you're talking about 94th, 136, so 69% nice completion percentage, 1,073 yards, 268 per game, 7 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. They're 1-3 in those games, but the defense in those games allowed totals of 40, 32, 48, and 30 points. The game they won, they had to drop 40 on the Chiefs to win that game. They had a game they lost 30-29. 2 of the games they were not close. So I mean, like there have been a lot of instances of Derek Carr going head to head with Pat Mahomes or Steve Spagnuolo, if you will, and him playing very well. So hopefully we get that again. And I don't think Derek's played that poorly at this point in the season. I really don't. Like, a lot of people want to complain about the quarterback when you don't win a game. They haven't been losing games because of the quarterback position.
No, we talked about the unfortunate pick 6. That was just a really freakish kind of play, the way that ball ricocheted. But it is what it is. Obviously, I think it's good to have that kind of mental preparation for the stadium already. You know what you're getting. Even like you said, he mentioned one particular fan in specific he knows is going to be there. Obviously, it's a season ticket holder front row that just seems to just berate him.
I've always said it's one of my favorite environments. The crowd is unbelievable. It just it feels like that college atmosphere. Just diehard fans, super loud. One of, if not the loudest stadium I've ever played in, and and they have a really good football team. So it's a fun environment to play in. Very tough to execute and win in, but again, one of my favorite places to play. They'll say all kinds of crazy stuff about your family and you and all that, and it's all a part of it, especially to me since I played there so many times. There's one guy that always says a lot of stuff to me, but we've had fun over the years. But for sure, one of the toughest places to play.
You know how happy that Chiefs fan is like, I'm still in Derek's head.
Well, here's the thing. Do you think he knows? That's my question.
He's got to know.
Do you think that one Chiefs fan, when Derek says that, he's like, he's talking about me? I'm the guy.
So. I think so. It seems like it's that personal or bad. I don't know.
I do wonder how many times quarterbacks, when that play in a particular stadium, like Drew going to Atlanta or Matt Ryan coming to New Orleans, if they have like one fan that they have like, a vendetta, it was like that guy, he's always here. He knows how to cut straight to my soul. There's gotta be,
for whatever reason, they've got like the nastiest juice on you, and they're not people, they're not afraid to throw it down, being all safe in the stands.
Some folks are just better at it than others, man.
Oh,
some
for sure.
They know how to cut straight to your soul. And apparently that guy, like, he's left an impression on Derek. I don't know exactly what he said to him, but the other thing, Derek in this game, I think he needs 73 something yards to go over 40,000. So, and I don't think a lot of Saints fans are going to be like, great, fantastic, but that's a significant mark. He's going to become the 25th player in NFL history to go over 40,000 passing yards. We've been playing football games in this league for a long time. That's a significant number. Now, one guy who did it recently this season, I believe, was Kirk Cousins. Another guy who is about to do it, he's like a little less than 1,000 yards away, is Andy Dalton. So that's
Andy.
When people tell you that like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, and Andy Dalton are not very similar in their careers, like that's incorrect. They're all right there in terms of production. So we'll see. Either way, like I think to me on offense, Derek Carr is the X factor. Do you have anyone you want to list right now before we move forward?
I'm hoping like who's going to appear in the run game for this team, because I'm obviously worried about Alvin playing with ribs that are demolished. I I don't know what we have in depth behind him, just because it seems like the carries for Jamal Williams, for whatever reason, have been very limited. And then we talked about earlier with the Kendre Miller situation, Cooley's back, but are you going to really thrust him into that big of a role right away? And then you got Taysom Hill. Obviously, he's got fractures in ribs. Another concern there for a guy that's one of your powerhouses with the football in his hand anytime. So I just want to know, does that mean then you're going to have to rely more heavily on kind of like Derek and the passing game against the Chiefs?
It's a good question. I think that's fair. It's going to be interesting to see who can get out there and who is productive and how you manage it.
Maybe a surprise from what's his name? The young running back we were all talking about in training camp, Jordan Mims.
What about him?
Maybe he gets a little action, because I don't think he's had a touch at all this year.
He was going to get. He has had. I think he had a run in week 1. But
Panthers game, okay.
If he was going to get action, he'd have gotten action last week. I wouldn't be surprised if he's inactive if Kendre's active. You don't need 4 running backs. So yeah, and I'm going to kind of bridge off that and kind of segue into this Chris Jones conversation that I want to have. And one thing that I've heard in the past and has just continued to fascinate me is Chris Jones. Understand that when Chris Jones goes onto the field, a lot of the time, even Chris Jones doesn't know exactly where he's going. And that's fascinating to me, because, and I talked to Landon Young about this yesterday in the locker room, and it was like, how do you have a plan for somebody if like they don't even know what he's going to do? Because what happens is a majority of the time, right? Spags is calling a play on the sideline, and then Chris goes out there and picks whatever matchup he wants and goes to that spot. And he does a pretty good job of balancing it. And because I went and looked up the numbers. So to this point in the season, 91 of his snaps have come on the right side of the line. 110 of his snaps have come on the left side of the line. So pretty well balanced. He's had 33 snaps at the left defensive tackle spot. He's had 39 snaps at the right defensive tackle spot. He's had 20 snaps at, they call it Leo. It's basically just a stand-up rusher. So he's kind of just hovering around, but he's on the left side. He's had 20 snaps doing that. He's done that on the right side 17 times. He's lined up at the left defensive end spot 57 times. He's lined up at the right defensive end spot 35 times. So it's not like you can say, well, he likes to go over here. I mean, that's about as balanced. Like, obviously, clearly he does like to go to the left side a little bit more. But
it's not skewed that, and not that big of a difference.
Right. But if he likes the matchup on the right side better, he's going to that side. And, I asked Landon, like, how do you
tap the guy on the shoulder and be like, all right, I'm in it.
That's exactly what he does. He just says, hey, move over. I'm rushing from here. Right. And I asked Landon Young, I was like, how do you come up with a plan for that? And he's just like, I don't know. Sometimes you have a plan. Sometimes you just got to nut up. And I was like, that's fair. That's a good way to put it.
Fair enough. Right.
And I don't know if Landon's going to play this week. It'll depend on, health. But I chatted with Colin Saunders in the locker room about this, because Colin played with him in Kansas City. And Colin was one of those players that if Chris saw a matchup, he would be like, hey, Colin, move the F over. I'm taking this, but you go find somebody else. And so let's see. This is what Colin had to say.
With Chris, he moves around a lot. Mm-hmm. How much of that is called versus how much of that is...
He does that on his own.
Yeah, how does that work?
He gets the call, knows what each person does in that call, and then he goes to where he wants to go to in that play. So, if the 3-tech has something less desirable than the end, he's going to go to the end. If the 3-tech has something, like the 3-tech got something where it's like, all right, you get the one-on-one, he's probably going to go to the 3-tech. But, it's just kind of knowing the play, knowing what they have on that play, and then going to what he wants to do for that play.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like even when the play is called, he doesn't even know necessarily until he sees the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something that happens very often. I mean, is that just because he's so talented?
Yeah, I mean, he's a special player. I mean, he's going to be a Hall of Famer when he gets done with this. And so, Spags kind of and then you got to realize, too, that relationship. I mean, Spags got there the year I got there, I believe, in 2019, and now it's 2024. So they've been, bonding through the same defense for 5-6 years, whatever now. and they, like now they have the trust into, okay, I know this is where this play is going, this is where we got to stunt to, then I would rather do this. Like if I was a 3, I would have to contain. But since I know it's that trust of knowing the defense well enough to be like, well, I know that the 3 has contain right here, so I want to go to the end so I can go into the defense instead of, looping out to contain. So it just comes with that, like knowing the defense, knowing it well. Like I knew the defense really well, obviously, and then I felt like that contributed to, my best year before I left there. So it's just kind of knowing that defense and getting a chance to work in it instead of just playing in it. You know what I mean?
But there were times where it was like, hey, no, I want this matchup.
Yeah. No, he always takes precedent for sure. He gets first dibs, absolutely. But usually it's but also just and me when I was on there, but also like the guys that are still on there, like Noddy and Mike Pennell, like those are very close friends of mine. Turk Warden, Turk actually plays 3 tech, I think, behind him, and then rush downs. Then Mike Pennell and Noddy are more of the base down guys, but yeah, they their play styles complementary because Chris is the 3 tech, and then you got Noddy and Mike are the noses, and they're true noses. So they play so well with each other because of that, because they're complementary to each other.
Yeah, and so that's what he's saying there. It's like, hey, I like this matchup. That's got to be a bad feeling when you're down there as an offensive lineman, and then Chris just says, "Get out of the way, I'm taking this one." like, uh-oh. He sees something. But
what does it say too? What does it say too about you if all of a sudden Chris Jones is like, "I'm coming after you"?
Exactly. and that's interesting. What Landon said is like, you look at it on film, it's like, yes, as a pass rusher, that's a lot. Like I don't know how you handle it, but he doesn't always seem as keen on playing run defense. So Derek kind of compared it to Micah Parsons in that, like Micah, they move him all around. Now he doesn't rush inside as much, but he will, be a stand-up linebacker. He'll move all around. So you kind of have a plan for that. You're gonna have to have a plan for Chris, but at a certain point, you just got to run the ball right at him and say, "All right, make a play," because that's a good way to slow down a guy, make him play run defense. So I did ask Dennis Allen about that yesterday, and this is what he said.
Yeah, with Chris Jones and the amount that he moves around inside, outside, how much more challenging is this to prepare for?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think anytime you have a player that's that talented, you don't know where they're going to line up. I don't know whether he's going to be on the right side, the left side, he's going to be inside, he's going to be outside, he's going to be, head up somebody. We don't know that answer. And so here's what we have to be able to do. We have to be able to adjust to whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm sure that they're going to try to, put them in spots that they think they have a favorable matchup.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It's like you not only have to have a plan for him, you have to be able and ready to adjust that plan on the fly based on where he is. And I know Deuce said this. I don't want to play the whole clip, but like Deuce basically said that you gotta always know where he is. If he's on the sideline, I need to know where he's standing on the sideline. Like I need to be aware on every snap. Where is Chris Jones? Where is he lining up? And how am I going to deal with him? And I think to me, that's when you're on offense, that's the biggest thing is like in terms of winning and losing this game is how do you handle Chris Jones? He's going to blow up some plays. You're not going to stop him completely. You're not going to erase him from the game plan. The fact they were able to do that against Micah was remarkable. It's not happening this week. You just gotta contain him. You gotta find a way to stop him from wrecking the game.
What's amazing too, when you look at the Spags defense, obviously the numbers, the average points per game are low, but takeaways and sack numbers really aren't that impressive.
No, but I mean that's they impact a lot of plays that you can get the ball out on, and Derek, to his credit, has been good about getting the ball out. He hasn't taken a ton of sacks, but he has dealt with a lot of pressure. So whether he handles that particularly well throwing the ball, he does avoid negative plays, that pick six notwithstanding, pretty well for a guy who doesn't move that well. So we'll see how that goes, but. We've been on the defensive or the offense this whole time. Let's do some quick X factors on the defensive side. What do you kind of look at in this matchup?
We talked about Tyrann Mathieu obviously earlier, and there's no way he was missing this game. The guy's still a takeaway machine for this team, and I think he leads in that category as well, where it helps inspire guys to want to be that ball hawk too. But I expect him to fully show up in Kansas City, a guy that knows Mahomes well, and hopefully Mahomes continues his turnover ways. I mentioned the lack of takeaways for their defense. The turnovers have been really high for Chiefs offensively, and I think Tyrann and crew in that secondary I'm really looking at to be that X factor and making a difference and getting a pull or two, bringing in an interception off of Mahomes, and that obviously will sway that fierce mob mentality crowd that they have there in Kansas City too.
No, I mean that's the thing with Pat Mahomes is he can do stuff that no one else can do. And that's basically what DA said. Is like you watch him on film, and it's like there's no one else doing that. Like he's doing stuff that you just can't replicate. But he will give you chances. He there's a point where you're so confident in your own ability that you think you can make every play, even when it's like, I know you're one of one, but even you aren't making this throw, and so he will give you opportunities. He will make some throws that you're just like, wow, thanks. But I have a clip on this, but I'll just kind of paraphrase it. Like the Saints defense this week, to me, the biggest factor is going to be, I think they can hold up generally well against the receivers that the Chiefs have. They don't have a ton of weapons on offense right now because those guys are hurt, right? Like, I feel like I understand what Xavier Worthy's going to try to do. I can't let him get on top of me. I can't let him get downfield for a 60, 70-yard touchdown. But I understand that, right? Like, I understand how I'm going to play that. Sky Moore, another example. Like, I feel like I like my guys versus their guys. The issue with the Chiefs is it's not all about that first play. Because Pat Mahomes, while he's not the most mobile guy in the NFL, he's mobile enough, and he just has this knack for navigating in space and understanding where his escape lanes are and how to, it's like he's playing in slow motion against the pass rush a lot of the time, and he's able to extend plays in ways that a lot of guys just aren't able to. And so, to me, it's going to come down to not only can you cover on that initial route, can you cover again? Can you cover that secondary route that the Chiefs have been so good at, particularly a guy like Travis Kelce? It's like they're in each other's heads where it's like he knows exactly where he needs to get to when Pat Mahomes is scrambling to just find space, catch that ball, and then create a play out of nothing. Like the Chiefs, in my opinion, are the best team in the NFL at creating big plays on dead plays, creating explosive plays in situations where you won the initial route. And then he extends, and then he just like you especially it's funny when you're watching the broadcast version of the game, you're just like you can just see it developing, and you're like, oh man, you give him too much time. He's gonna throw the ball, and that when the camera pans over to whoever he's throwing it to, they're gonna be standing by themselves because he's just created a scenario where that guy has been able to find space, and then he's gonna hit him because he can throw from so many different angles, so many different arm slots, and so there's two ways to avoid that, right? You get him on the ground initially, or your corners and your safeties plaster a lot longer than they're supposed to have to. And to me, that's the X factor. If you can eliminate those second chance plays, you kind of like you talk about it in basketball. It's like an offensive rebound in basketball where you kick it out and you get a wide open three. Like that's how it feels when you're playing the Chiefs. Is like, yeah, they might miss on that first. They might miss a layup, but if they get the rebound and kick it out, suddenly you got a bomb. You just were not like you could have called the perfect play against the perfect offense, or you could have called the perfect defensive play at the perfect time, and you cover it up, and then it still burns you. So to me, that's the biggest thing. If you want to beat this Chiefs team, you gotta eliminate those scenarios as much as possible. And I just don't know how much you can because Pat Mahomes is that singularly good. But that's the big one to me.
Yeah, what's terrifying, too, is going into this game after making some really terrible mistakes last game that gave the game away. And, pretty much going into the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champs house on prime time, you pretty much have to play a close to perfect game in order to come out with a victory here. And we didn't get into it too much, but the NFC South is really, highly contested right now. Everybody 3-2. You got to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, the Saints have not. The Saints under Dennis Allen have been very, very bad in games where they are a 3 or more point underdog. I saw a stat from the Action Network that they sent out. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Or in Dennis Allen games, Dennis Allen head coach games, when his team is an underdog of a field goal or more, his teams are 6-29 straight up. So if you bet $100 on the Saints in those games, you would be down $1,542. And so, yeah, hopefully they can buck that. And I do think you look at the Saints team and you know, it's frustrating to lose games the way you did. But what you can say about the Saints is they have been they've won 2 games big, like they played really well on offense, and then they've been competitive. They haven't. This is not a team that I feel like will be overwhelmed in this matchup. The question is, can you make those big plays in critical moments to go win a game? And to this point, they have not done that. They've won 2 games that they'd never really gotten to critical moments, and they've failed, at least on defense, in the critical moments of 2 games that you could have gone out and won. Now the offense has showed up in those big moments, and I do think that's a positive trait. Even in games you lost, the offense found ways to go down in clutch time and score a go-ahead touchdown. Got to go get a stop. And I don't know, like, this is the last team in the NFL. This is the last quarterback in the NFL that I want to find myself in they got 2 minutes, so they need to go down and score a touchdown. Can we stop
60
them?
seconds.
Yeah. Well, if I'm up more than a field goal, it's a different scenario. Like you saw last night, Kirk Cousins against the Bucs. Like he can go. Like it's a much different scenario. That's why the Eagles game is so frustrating, because you actually had them down 5. That's a good scenario to be in. 2 minutes, all they can do is score a touchdown. You got the whole field to work with. Now you got to avoid the mistakes, and that's been the thing. Can you clean that up? Hopefully they can, but. Those mistakes tend to happen more often when the plays get extended, and we'll see how that goes. But that's all I got. Anything else you want to throw in before we close out here?
No, the thing with the Eagles game too, obviously, is, man, that's another game at home that you just let slip away. And we've talked about way too many of those. Going into this matchup, no, it's the stiffest of the test you could imagine right now. A team that's Super Bowl pedigree. They've been winning ugly, just finding a way to grind it out and get the W. They've had a ton of injuries, but have able to overcome it. Whereas you're on the flip side, going into their house, prime time, dealing with a bunch of injuries as well. But obviously, you don't have the same. You wouldn't think the Saints have that same mental makeup, and they haven't showed it the last 2 games to be able to close the deal. Who knows though? Because the script writers have been wild. I'm hoping that we come out ahead in this one, but obviously, you feel very hesitant and thinking this is a guaranteed W because it's the Kansas City Chiefs in their house, and Patrick Mahomes and co are deadly. Travis Kelce, to me, scares the hell out of me. I think you mentioned even going into last game, Kyle Pitts didn't bother you because it was like, is he really that big of a tight end? Whereas a Dallas Goedert and a Travis Kelce, there's big hulking dudes that I don't know if the Saints can handle.
Yeah, I'm worried this is going to be a get-right game for Travis Kelce.
I don't want the right, exactly. They'll keep showing Taylor Swift all night.
Whenever Taylor Swift is in the building, they play better. And she's probably going to be there on Monday. One more note, Colin Saunders. So his brother is a backup dancer for Taylor Swift. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, his brother is a backup dancer for Taylor Swift. And we asked Colin, I was like, who's your brother going to be rooting for? He's rooting for me. What the hell are you talking about? He's like, right. Take it. Better be rooting for me. He's like, that's his boss. I was there first. But yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's gonna be a fun game. Now, like the Chiefs are that team that seems to always win in clutch moments, and the Saints seem to be the team that loses in clutch moments. And if that happens again, I like the Chiefs. But at the same time, like, I think nationally, if you're gonna have a panel of folks picking these games, and they're all gonna pick the Chiefs, I guarantee it. It's gonna be another scenario where you go and they say, okay, everyone pick the game, and you're going to have 6 Chiefs.
Red, right.
And I'm telling you, the Saints can win this game. Will they? That's a question. But I do firmly believe that the Saints can walk in there and come out with a win. And if they can, then the NFC South is going to have 3-3-2 teams in it. And I feel like the Saints, I feel like all 3 of those teams could potentially go to the playoffs. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You got to find ways to win games. That's been the difference for this team in terms of getting left out of the postseason on a tiebreaker and sneaking your way in, is win some of these games. You don't have to win all of these games, but you got to win some of them. You got to win some of those games that's kind of a toss-up. And I think this will be a toss-up. And you got to find a way. But All right. That's all I got. Anything more? You good?
No, just expecting a tight one too, and hopefully the Saints' luck changes on some things. And I don't know. It's hard to believe that calls will go their way in Kansas City. It's hard to think that at all.
Yeah, and a blowout loss would feel really negative. It would really kind of color this season a lot differently. Well, like, I don't think if they go in there and they lose a close game, anyone's going to be like, oh, how could they do that? If they go in there and they lose by 20, 25, the conversation around this team is going to start to get really negative really fast. So I think this is an important week. This team needs to go there to Kansas City on national television and play well. And if they can do that, then this season feels like it has hope. If they can't, then again, no one's going to be talking about, oh, should they trade for Davante Adams? They're going to be like, should they get rid of everybody?
Right.
But all right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for Dan Portillo for coming on. We're getting ready. Saints 2-2 at Kansas City Chiefs 4-0. Monday Night Football. Let's get it done. We're going outside. We're going under the lights. It's going to be a good time. Going to have to wear some sort of light jacket, and I'm excited to do it. But all right, who dat? Thanks, everyone, again. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. You can hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can hit up Steve at Steve Geller, WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. We'll be back at you Tuesday morning with a post-game breakdown pod. It's going to obviously be a little bit of a weird week. We're going to have to cram some podcasts in, but we will get it done. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all.
Later, everyone.
Peace.